All right, let's start with a really big question. What if truth isn't something you find? What if it's something you make? That's the mind-bending idea from the philosopher William James that we're going to dive into today, and it completely rethinks one of the most basic ideas in our lives. For centuries, the main idea was that truth is something fixed, something out there, kind of like a treasure buried in a mine, just waiting for us to dig it up. But William James came along and challenged that entire way of thinking with a really powerful question. What if truth isn't a discovery at all, but an invention? Now, to really appreciate just how radical James's idea was, we have to get a feel for the philosophical world he was stepping into. For a long, long time, there were really two major theories that dominated the whole conversation about truth. So, on one hand, you've got the correspondence theory. Sounds fancy, but the idea is pretty simple. A belief is true if it's a perfect mirror of reality. The statement, "it's raining," is true if you look outside and, yep, rain is actually falling. Then, on the other hand, you have the coherence theory. This says an idea is true if it just fits logically with all your other beliefs, like a perfect puzzle piece. But notice the problem James saw. Both of these theories treat our minds as, well, kind of passive, just sitting back, either reflecting reality or organizing beliefs, but not really doing anything. And this is exactly where William James, who was also a brilliant psychologist, saw this huge disconnect. He looked at these theories and said, wait a minute. This isn't how we live. He felt they were totally cut off from the messy, active, day-to-day reality of human experience. So that dissatisfaction led James to a completely new approach. He said, let's stop thinking about truth as a static thing we have and start thinking about it as something that happens, something we do. And here it is, the absolute core of his pragmatic theory. For James, truth isn't something you find. It's something you make. It's a human invention, a tool that we create to help us navigate the world better. It's not an object, it's a process. So, what this means is that an idea isn't born true. It becomes true when we test it, when it proves itself useful in our experiences. So you can think of it like this. Truth isn't some destination that's already on the map. It's the path we actually create by walking it. To make this even clearer, James used this fantastic analogy. He said, think about the word health. It's not some abstract thing you can hold in your hand, right? Health is just the name we give to a whole bunch of processes, good digestion, good circulation, all working together smoothly. James said truth is exactly the same kind of word, but for our ideas. Of course, this immediately brings up a huge question, right? What does it actually mean for an idea to work? This can't just mean, hey, whatever I want to be true is true. And James was super clear on this. He had specific criteria. He basically laid out two key tests. First, an idea has to have what he famously called cash value. This means it has to pay out in the real world with useful, satisfactory results. It has to make a real, positive difference. And second, the idea has to be verifiable. We have to be able to check it, somehow, against our actual experience. Now, the most straightforward way to check an idea is through direct verification. This is that aha moment, It's when your idea comes face to face with reality and it just clicks. It's confirmed right then and there. Here's the classic example. You're lost, and you have this idea that a particular path will lead you to a house. So you take it, you walk down the path, and boom, there's the house. Your idea led you to a good outcome, and you confirmed it with your own eyes. The idea worked, and in that moment, it became true. But let's be real, we can't directly verify everything ourselves. I've never been to the Amazon rainforest, but I believe it exists. James explained this with indirect verification. He said most of what we call truth operates on a kind of credit system, where we trust that other people have done the direct checking for us. We rely on this credit system every single day. You trust a map to get you where you're going. You believe your car's fuel gauge is telling you the truth. You accept that, say, Abraham Lincoln was a real person. These ideas work because they help us navigate the world without problems. Their value, just like the value of paper money, is held up by this massive system of shared trust. Okay, so this works for maps and houses, but now let's really push this theory to its limits. What happens when we apply this pragmatic method to the biggest, most abstract questions out there? Things like God, morality, or even absolute truth itself. And this is where James's theory gets really fascinating, and maybe a little controversial. What about beliefs that you just can't physically verify in a lab, like religious faith? Can an idea like God be true? See, for James, the question isn't, can you prove God exists? He thought that was the wrong question entirely. The pragmatic question is, what is the real-world effect of believing in God on a person's life? If that belief gives someone a sense of peace, if it adds hope, if it helps them live a better, more meaningful life, then for that person, that belief has cash value. It works. And in the pragmatic sense, it is true for them. So, does this just mean that anything goes, that truth is whatever you want it to be? Not quite. James didn't think we had any absolute truths right now, a final idea that no future experience could ever change. But he did hold it out there as a possibility, an ideal we're working towards. He thought that as humanity gains more and more experience, our truths will slowly become more stable and reliable. So after exploring all this, what's the big takeaway? Why does this philosophical idea from over 100 years ago still matter so much for how we think about our world today? Well, what James really did was flip the script. He asks us to see truth not as some cold, hard object we have to go out and find, but as a living, breathing tool that we humans create, that we test, and that we improve, all to help us live better lives. He puts our experience right at the heart of it all. And you can hear it perfectly in his own words. True ideas are those that we can assimilate, validate, corroborate, and verify. False ideas are those that we cannot. It's that simple. The ultimate test is always how an idea connects back to our actual lives. And that leaves us with a final, pretty challenging thought to chew on. If our truths are ultimately the inventions that work for us, what does that mean for the most fundamental beliefs that guide your life? What makes them true for you?